do so much with the work. And I wish I could remember, but I think it was when my wife was pregnant with my last daughter, and I was in the factory and working, not with a really large group like we're really used to working with, but it was just a small group mixed with women and men. And my wife was pregnant and gave birth to my last daughter, whose name is Lisa, incidentally. And as I went to work the day after she was born, they had this big baby shower for me. All the workers, all these baby gifts in there, blankets and all that kind of thing. And I thought, you know, how much nicer can people be to throw a man a baby shower? That was really memorable, because you would think, who's going to think of that? You know, people say congratulations, having a baby, but to do that, a big party with all these gifts for the baby, that was touching for me, really, really touching. There are others, but that one always stayed with me for some reason.
Can you describe an average work day?
That's hard to describe, because when I say they worked hard, it wasn't easy, because people went in for years and years and did the same repetitive work every day. Most females had jobs where they crimped and soldered, which is crimping wires, putting parts in, soldering the parts in, and doing that every day. And then you had men who had the different jobs, such as wiring materials. That your job there, the duties there may have varied a little, and it was a little different. But for people working on the assembly lines that I'm talking about, which were the majority of your employees, at least in the factory, and the working conditions were very, very good. And if they weren't, if you didn't have the kind of supervision that cared or that tried to drive you, it would have been a lot worse. But I can still feel that was the repetitiveness of the work for a lot of people had to be really, really tough. But they never, you know, they were able to handle it pretty good. Only because they were allowed to talk to each other and not just sit there, and they could get up and go to the ladies' room without asking a supervisor, that kind of thing. So it really helped. It really helped.
What kind of changes were made over the years you were at RCA?
Well, it's hard to describe changes because of the amount of time I was then out of the plant. But when they stopped making television and going from these moving assembly lines, that was a big change, because then you went into more sophisticated government equipment that required white rooms where you had to wear the white and the hats, and just clean rooms, a lot of that. We had a fabrication department that made just about anything that you couldn't buy, they made in RCA themselves in the fabrication department. I'm talking about from screws to large chassis to whatever. They did that. They had a plant. They had a building that made their own coils and other materials. That changed. They got rid of the manufacturing or the fabrication department for whatever reason. It was probably much easier at that time than to go outside and buy your material from other vendors. But I saw those kinds of assembly lines disappear, where they then just had long tables where you sat there and did your work and that kind of thing. That's the biggest change I saw, was that. The assembly lines from just sitting in those positions, making those white rooms, as they call them, which were dust-free and had to be, and that kind of thing. Then closing other buildings. As I said, we made our own coils and resistors. The crystals, we had a crystal lab. They stopped all that. And unfortunately, those kind of changes meant that Camden was shrinking by getting rid of some of those things. And if you thought about it while you were working there, you could sense that something's happening here that is not very good. And that was not one of the better changes that I saw. But the shrinkage was the change that was hard to take because, as I said, you just knew something wasn't good there.
How much did RCA influence the growth of Camden?
Oh, I think at the time, a lot. And it wasn't just RCA. At one time, just in the bargaining unit that I represented, we had 7,200 people. There were times even before that when we had as many as 10,000 production and maintenance workers in the plant. And many of those people all worked in Camden. So I don't only credit RCA with helping to influence Camden because you had RCA, you had Campbell Soup, you had so many industries around there. Right across from RCA was Esterbrook Penn, one of the buildings. And again, Campbell Soup was right there. The shipyard was still doing work, I think. So along with so many of those places, and I could name others, it had a great influence on Camden because they had jobs. And I think that's part of the problem now. There is no more manufacturing. There are little bits and pieces, and I don't really know what they do there, but L3 is right across the street from RCA. But outside of that, I don't know what else there is. So it had a big influence on Camden, I think. Positive influence.
How long did you work at RCA?
Counting my time that I was out on official union leave of absence, my total seniority I accrued up to close to 39 years.
And why did you leave RCA?
Well, I went on union leave of absence when I was elected to those offices and then went on the staff of the International Union. And then when I decided to retire, that was leaving RCA.
Can you describe how you felt when RCA was closed down and taken over?
One of the saddest times of my working career anyway was when GE took over RCA. If you liked RCA, it almost broke your heart because it changed everything so dramatically. And having been involved in the union and knowing some of these other companies and what they do, the sadder part was you knew that things were going to change so dramatically in the way the company was run, and it did when they eventually moved just all the RCA people out and began to move all GE people in. You could just see how the mindset changed so much. It was no longer the RCA family. It was the GE method of doing business, which means bottom line, how much are we making? And having been involved in the union and knowing a lot of people from GE and so, knowing that the head of GE, he really didn't want all of RCA. Even though they merged, they took over RCA, they wanted NBC. That was a big moneymaker. They didn't care about all the other things, and it proved that because after they were there a while, they started to sell off all the other parts of RCA. And that was devastating. And that was one of the reasons that prompted me to retire. Because I did not, as a representative, I just didn't feel I wanted to deal in my union position with people from GE. Because I would say I may have had a little bit of a temper. And dealing with RCA people who understood me, and I understood them, we didn't have the kind of relationship that, like an adverse relationship. We had a good, honest of opinion kind of thing where we could agree to disagree and that would be it. You couldn't do that with GE people. And I thought, great time to get out. So that's what I did. I wasn't happy at all with that, and just hurt a lot of people, But that's part of life, I guess.
What did you enjoy about working at RCA?
The camaraderie with the people, just all great, all cared about each other, never question about that. You could have, as I said, 6,000 people in the plant, and knew almost 6,000 people by their first names. You just saw each other every day, going whatever the buildings they were working in. They could be in manufacturing, they could be in the general offices or wherever. Everybody just knew each other. Good morning, in the morning, and that kind of thing. It just the closeness of the people that worked there that made it so great, unique. Just loved it. I have never, ever heard anybody say, and I mean this sincerely, did I hate working at RCA? Never. What they say is they were the best times of my life. I have a nephew, as a matter of fact, that works at Boeing, and he's got a good job. He's a technician, great job, travels all over the country, and when he stops and sees me, talks about his job at Boeing, and then always goes, Uncle Joe, RCA was the best days, because he worked at RCA before he got laid off, and he would say the same thing. I like my job where I am, but RCA was just great. And I think that was the general opinion of everybody that worked there. So I was lucky, fortunate, to meet so many nice people. And I'm not only talking about the people that worked in the factory and in the offices. 99% of the people in supervision were exactly the same way.
Well, that's all the interview questions I have for you. Is there anything else you want to share with us before I turn off the recorder?
If I want to what?
Do you want to share with us any stories or anything like that?
No, the only thing is, it was RCA, and I'll finish on this. It wasn't just the fact that there was manufacturing and that they manufactured things. They had what they called the Victor AA. They sponsored basketball, softball teams, intramural teams for all the different sections of the plant that had teams. You played, and it was big. And they sponsored picnics. I remember we used to go to Clementon Lake Park, where the company would pay for the whole thing for RCA employees. It was a city within a city, let me put it that way. And when you saw it start to decline, it was heartbreaking. And probably, for me, and I know thousands of other people, best days of their lives. Enjoyed it so much, and no ounce of sorrow that I worked there and met all those people. It was just so great, and I'm thankful for that.
Well, thank you so much for